First and foremost, I want to begin by giving our praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rucha, Kodash. Double honors to the elders and to the apostle of the millstone, and enough respect to the brothers out there pushing and spreading the gospel of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai to the four corners of the world. Shalom, Yahweh, Bahashem, Shai, Brakatham. I hope to make this video very quick. I'm just going to touch on a few articles, but before I do so, I'm just going to pull up a few precepts emphasizing how the Lord has made us watchmen over the house of Israel. So the first precept I have here is Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 17. It says, "Also I set a watchman over you, saying, hearken to the sound of the trumpet, but they say we will not hearken." The sound of the trumpet is the grave words that we preach unto our people, that the day of the Lord is at hand, that the day of the Lord is darkness and gloominess. It is a day of destruction. It is a day that is terrifying, and it's a day that's going to be weeping, right? That there's going to be a lot of weeping and death and mourning. And so, but, they said the majority of our people say we will not hearken. And the reason they don't hearken is because this is as opposed to the false prophets, right, that dealeth falsely. They have healed also the hurt of the daughter of my people, slightly saying, so they had our people in a peaceful mindset. That's what it means, right? Because you're supposed to be, when you hear this truth, your life is supposed to change. You're supposed to be restless, not in a terrible way, but it's supposed to agitate you into working out your salvation with fear and trembling. Right? You're not supposed to be in a, in a sort of like a careless mindset, But it says that they have healed. Let me look that up, actually. Get this in different translations. They offer superficial treatment, right? They dress the wound of my people as though it were not serious. The wounds of our people are their wickedness and the judgment that's coming, as payment for their wickedness. But it says slightly saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. Right? People have problems with us because we're not peaceful men, because we are prophets of doom. But the Lord ain't dealing with no one who ain't preaching of doom. This is the book of Isaiah 62, verse 6. "I have set watchmen upon thy walls, which shall never hold their peace day nor night. Ye that make mention of the Lord Yahweh, keep not silence." All right? "And give him no rest till he establish, until he make Jerusalem a praise in the earth." So the prophets are supposed to be like a torrent, right? Right? Constantly pouring out that living waters. And not only, being consistent in the eyes of the people, but also to the Lord, right? We not giving him any rest till he established the kingdom of heaven. Another one is, let me see, Ezekiel, the 3rd chapter, 17. It says, "Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. So therefore hear the words at my mouth and give them warning from me." And, this precept is just so that, get this out here. It's just to highlight the fact that we are supposed to constantly be looking into things, right? Even when things, in this case, don't necessarily seem to be going in favor of prophecy. And what I mean by that is that I have some few articles out here, and when I read through all of them, this is the narrative so far, right? You have Russia preparing an invasion. At least they have troops on the Finland borders, which seem as though they are about to invade, and they're doing the same thing that they did to Ukraine. And what this has led to is that this had caused NATO members to unite, including America, and everybody is and they're all coming up with means to break Russia. One of them being 500% tariffs on the goods of any country trading in energy with Russia. So I'm going to get into this article, right? That's one of them, They have another one that says NATO scrambles jet over dangerous Russian bomber maneuvers. So it seems as though the prophecy that's written up in the scriptures, which is that Russia is the one that's going to come up against America, you know, with NATO against America and all these other nations against America, it seems like we're seeing the opposite. And this is a test, or, something that the Lord does to prove his believers, to prove those who have faith in him. Because this is the exact opposite of what we preach in the scriptures. But nevertheless, just like how in the beginning of the war against Ukraine, Russia was seen to be losing a battle, but now you got Ukraine losing so hard that they're willing to negotiate. Similarity, same thing is going to happen here. And even just like during the Babylonian, when the Babylonians came against, was it the? I'm thinking of the Assyrians. Right, when the Babylonians came in and the warning. Let me see right now. Egypt for help. So Isaiah chapter 31 verse 1, it says, "Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help, and stay on horses and trust in chariot, because they are many, and in horsemen, because they were very strong, but they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek the Lord Yahweh their God." Right? And let me see. Judah won against Egypt alliance. And the reason being is that it looked as though Egypt was a very powerful nation, and all these kingdoms that would rise up over there in the Levant, they always had a problem conquering Egypt, right? Egypt will fight fiercely, and so for Jake, it seemed like though if you allied yourself with Egypt, you would be able to come up on top. But here's a prophet telling them that despite what your mortal mind can, despite the plans that your mortal mind can come up with, and despite your senses, the things you see and the things you hear and how you feel, despite all that, right? No matter what the world looks like, you're supposed to what? Stick to what the Lord, to the will of the Lord, right? And that's pretty much the point that I wanted to bring out here on Isaiah the 31st chapter. And the point that I also want to emphasize is that, the same test that the Lord brought on them is the same thing that we're going through now. Because, like I'm saying, you have NATO, when Ukraine was attacked, Ukraine was not part of NATO. And so, they had to bear the brunt of war, and they still had help, but they had to kind of do things on their own, right? For lack of a better word. But since Russia came up against Finland, and Finland being a part of NATO, you see all these Edomite coalition, ganging up against Russia. And even you have these nations out there not willing to have a 500% tariff on them, are not even are trying to back away from Russia. Okay, and so despite all this, understand that it is Russia, right? According to scriptures, it is Russia that will bring down America, and Russia will bring down America with a whole nation, including the European nations, with it, and they will all come up against Babylon, and they will destroy Babylon with missiles and make Babylon a desolate wilderness from coast to coast. So let's get into touching a few things from the article. Let's try to go in a linear pattern here. Okay. So it says Finland preparing for the worst as Russia expands military presence near border. Finland has said it expects Russia to further build up troops along their shared border when the war in Ukraine ends, after reports that Moscow had strengthened its military bases near NATO frontier. Satellite images published in the New York Times appear to show an expansion of military infrastructure near the Finnish border, including rows of tents, military vehicles, innovations to fighter jets, shelters, and constructions on a previously unused helicopter base. They are changing structures, and we are seeing moderate preparations when it comes to building infrastructure close to the borders, meaning that they will, once the war in Ukraine hopefully ends, start to build back the forces that have been fighting in Ukraine, especially land forces. They are doing it in phases. I would say it is still moderate numbers. It is not big construction, but in certain places, building new infrastructure and preparing, bringing new equipment in, he said. You have to evaluate whether they are preparing to send more troops to Ukraine or preparing to build up their forces close to our border. But I guess they are doing both, right? So this is what we're seeing now. This is the information that we have right now. So like I said, they are building up, helicopter bases. They are building up new, military vehicles, renovations to fighter jet shelters. So they're doing all these things, and it says NATO scrambles jet over dangerous Russian bomber maneuvers. It says 2 NATO members have accused Russia of provocation along alliance's eastern flank. Poland said on Thursday that its fighter jet had intercepted Russian Su-24 bombers that performed dangerous maneuvers in international airspace over Baltic Sea. Okay, so the point here is that Russia is they're treading on places that that are making the Western allies very nervous, and they're all coming up together to fight against Russia. And so it seems as though that friction that we saw in the beginning of the year, where you have European nations angry with Trump because of how they chose to approach the war in Ukraine, now we're seeing those breaches being closed up because of a shared hatred, or at least a shared goal to subdue a threat, which is Russia. All right. So you have Polish defense ministers. He called Russian actions dangerous and intentional, and said that Polish pilots detected, intercepted, and forced the bomber to withdraw from the area. Now, let me get this one. It's a lot here. Oh, come on. Was it this one? Nah. All right. So it says Finland urges U.S. action as EU prepares new sanctions against Russia. So they're seeing all these things, all these actions being taken by Russia, and now they've all come together. And on top of them preparing for a physical confrontation, military-wise, they're also waging economical warfare in forms of sanctions. So these are new sanctions. I mean, I can't imagine what kind of sanctions they can place on Russia, because I know they've literally placed all the sanctions they can on Russia, and Russia is still surviving it and still pushing forward. So I don't know what new sanctions they're gonna put on Russia. But some ideas are already present in this article. No, it's not it. This is Europe is preparing a new sanctions package for the next summit. The United States, meaning President Donald Trump in practice, already has a very tough sanction package in place. I hope the United States will now come to the conclusion that Russia is playing for time, and now is the time to implement those actions. At the moment, I don't believe there's anything else to be done than for the West, the United States, and Europe together with like-minded nations to increase pressure on Russia to support Ukraine's army in rebelling Russia's continued attacks. Okay, so it talks about suffering, right, in Ukraine as shocking. Right, that's one. Okay, so they're preparing for the worst. I feel like I just had this highlighted. Okay. It says Donald Trump is losing patience with Russia, says Finnish leader, because they feel as though, that whole treaty to end the war in Ukraine, it's Russia that's kind of like stalling things right now, and they feel as though Russia is just trying to buy time so that they can end the war and attack Finland. Donald Trump is losing patience with Vladimir Putin. Finland's president has said after a lengthy conversation with his U.S. counterpart. Alexander Stubb said Trump and Putin, who are scheduled to speak by telephone on Monday, must not decide the fate of Ukraine over the head of its President Vladimir Zelensky. Stubb also said there was a chance, depending on how the phone call goes, that U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal would introduce into Congress this week a sanction package to make Russia's finances untenable. Stubb had been in near daily contact with Graham, who described the sanctions package as bone-crushing. If we pull together, we could say that Zelensky is patient and Donald Trump. If we were to pull it together, we could say that Zelensky is patient and Donald Trump is starting to be impatient, but in the right direction, that is towards Russia. The initial package contained which means they want to crank it up, but the initial package contained plans to impose 500% tariffs on the goods of any country trading in energy with Russia, a blunderbuss style of policy Trump has already reversed in his trade war. See what else they got here. So, Matthew Whitaker and the U.S. ambassador of NATO told the conference his country was Europe's friend, but warned of a smaller military presence in Europe. President Trump is just said enough. This is going to happen, and it's going to happen now, he said. This is going to be orderly, but we are not going to have any more patience for foot dragging in this situation. We just need to work through the practical consequences. The postponement of a U.S. troop withdrawal announcement until after the NATO summit next month will make capability planning more difficult. So they were planning on taking out troops, but because things are looking kind of crazy, they want to leave their troops in there. And the way the Lord has it, these nations ain't going to have their troops coming back home. He's just going to make the situation worse and worse, and they're just going to keep thinking to send more and more troops. And they're going to end up in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, But, so whether this looks backwards from what we were saying, the one thing that you should take from it is that, things always go well for Jake whenever Edomites fight against each other, whenever Edomites come up against each other, the rest of the world, it's destructive for everyone, but they end up losing more and more grip on the world, so to speak. Okay, so either way you look at it, the downfall of Esau is imminent, but don't be mistaken. Even though this narrative is backwards, the counsel of the Lord shall stand. Matter of fact, let me just get there right now. Oh. Let's see if I'm spelling that right. Is it that? All right, let me just see. All right, so Proverbs 19:21. Let's see if we can find anything. All right, it's a perfect one. Proverbs 21. Can't believe I didn't think of one. And Isaiah 46. So Isaiah chapter 46, verse 10, it says, remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from the ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Right? Isaiah chapter, what was it? Oh, come on. Proverbs 21:1, it says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. Okay, and what was the next one? Proverbs 19:21, it says, there are many devices in a man's heart, nevertheless the counsel of the Lord Yahweh shall stand. So yeah, that's it on that. Again, in summary, this was just, because we're watchmen of the Lord, you got to keep updating, keep yourself updated in relevant news, right? Especially news of wars and rumors of war. So that was that, and you go through it, and we find out that things may seem like it's working backwards from what we prophesied, right, through the Spirit and the inspiration of the Lord. But nevertheless, the counsel of the Lord shall stand. That was pretty much the whole video. So I'm going to end it right there by giving all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh. Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Racha Kodash. Shalom Yahweh Bashim Shai, Brakatham Toy Akims and Akos. That are listening in truth and in sincerity, may the blessing of blessing be upon the house. Until next time, Shalom. Let us continue to have faith and the Lord will eventually, right, make us glad. He will appear to our joy by revealing unto us exactly what we had hoped, right, through our faith in him. So until next time, Shalom.